And so, we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy, in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story of a life lived in the quiet shadows of a city that roared with progress. A life almost entirely unseen. The story of London's invisible women. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave a comment with your city and the time of night where you are, a quiet signal to all the other souls listening in this peaceful dark. And now, with the lights turned down low, and your body feeling heavy and warm, let's simply close our eyes and arrive at the beginning of our journey. The key is cold in your palm, not the shiny, promising brass of a new beginning, but a dull, heavy piece of rust-pitted iron. It feels less like a key and more like a shackle. You've just handed over nearly every penny you possess to a man whose face was a map of indifference. He didn't ask your name, and you didn't offer it. The transaction was purely mechanical. Your coins for his key. He gestured with a thumb towards a door. Narrow staircase that seemed to lean tiredly against the building next to it. And then he was gone, melting back into the grimy London afternoon. You stand for a moment in the entryway of the tenement building. The air is thick, a heavy blanket woven from the smells of coal smoke, damp wool, boiled cabbage, and something else. Something so human that you can't quite place. It's the smell of too many people living too close together. Their lives and their laundry and their sorrows all stewing in the same pot. You clutch your one small bundle of possessions tighter and begin to climb. The wooden stairs groan under your weight, each one a different note in a sad, weary song. You pass doors, all of them closed, but you can hear the life behind them. A baby's fretful cry, a hacking cough that sounds like it's tearing someone apart from the inside, the low murmur of an argument. Your room is on the 4th floor, the last one, the end of the line. The key scrapes in the lock, a sound of protest, but finally, the door swings inward on a single, grounding hinge, and you step inside. Home. The word feels like a joke, a bitter little piece of irony you can't even afford to laugh at. The room is barely larger than a pantry. There is a single window, its glass so clouded with grime that the London sky outside is just a vague, grey smear. Below the window, there is a small, empty hearth, its bricks blackened from fires long dead. You can already feel a damp chill radiating from the walls, a coldness that seems to live in the very bones of the building. The floor is bare, uneven planks of wood with dark gaps between them, offering glimpses into the darkness below. There is no furniture, not a chair, not a table, not even a hook on the wall. There is only the room, a box to exist in. You walk to the window and run a finger through the filth on the pane, creating a small, clear circle. Through it, you can see a chaotic tapestry of rooftops, chimney pots belching grey smoke into the grey air, and a spitterbat of laundry lines strung between buildings, their contents slim and colourless. This is your view. This is your world now. You've paid 3 shillings for this. 3 shillings for 1 week. A fortune. You try not to think about how you will find the next 3, or the 3 after that. The sheer, crushing weight of that thought is enough to pin you to the floor. For now, you have a roof. This is the grim reality of tenement life in the 1882. A system that thrives on the desperation of people like you. Historians still debate the very nature of these places. Were they a calculated form of cruelty designed by landlords to extract every last penny from the city's poorest? Or were they simply the cheapest, fastest answer to a city bursting at the seams? A problem so vast that any shelter, no matter how grim, was considered a solution. Looking at the water stain spreading like a disease across the ceiling, you have your own opinion. A strange detail you'd never know until you lived it is the way sound travels. The walls are so thin they feel like paper. You can hear the person in the next room sigh. A long, ragged sound of exhaustion that you feel in your own chest. Somewhere below, a pocket terrace. These aren't the sounds of community. They are the sounds of proximity without connection. 100 lonely islands, all floating in the same sea of noise. You sit down on the floor, your back against a damp wall, and pull your thin shawl around your shoulders. You are a spinster, an old maid, a woman alone. And in this city, in this age, that is the most dangerous thing you can be. The door is closed. The key is yours for 7 days. And in this tiny, empty room, you have just become completely and utterly invisible. The quiet of your room doesn't last. It is a thin, fragile thing, easily pierced by the sounds from beyond the walls. But more than that, it is broken by a gnawing emptiness in your stomach. It's a familiar ache, a dull and constant companion, but now it has a new urgency. That little pile of coins is gone. The key to this room has consumed it. Silence is a luxury, but food is a necessity. And so, with a sigh that seems to borrow the weariness from the floorboards, you push yourself to your feet. You must go out. You must find work. There is no other choice. Opening the door and stepping back into the dim hallway feels like leaving a tiny, inadequate fortress. You descend the groaning staircase, your hand trailing along the sticky, grimy wall for balance. The sounds of tenement life grow a little louder with each step down. Then, you reach the front door. You pull it open, and the city hits you. It's not a sight, or a sound, or a smell. It's all three at once. A physical wave that makes you stagger back. A deluge of noise. The relentless, deafening clatter of iron-shod wheels on cobblestones. Hundreds of them. From horse-drawn omnibuses to heavy drays pulled by massive, steaming horses. The sharp cries of street vendors hawking everything from eels to oranges to bootlaces. The incessant murmur of 1,000 conversations happening all at once. A river of human voices flowing past you. It's a roar. A constant, grinding, overwhelming roar that seems to vibrate in your bones. You have to consciously remind yourself to breathe. Then there's the smell. It's the same stew you noticed in the hallway, but amplified 100 times. The acrid bite of coal smoke is everywhere, catching in the back of your throat. It's layered with the earthy steam of horse manure, the scent of roasting chestnuts from a cart on the corner, and the faint, pervasive odor of the river itself, the Thames, the city's great artery and its open sewer. It's a perfume no one would ever bottle, and it clings to everything. You take a tentative step out onto the pavement, joining the tide of humanity. The crowd is a living thing, a single organism with 1,000 heads. People rush past you, their faces set in masks of grim determination. Men in smart suits and top hats stride with purpose, their polished boots clicking. Errand boys dart through the gaps, waving like nimble fish. Women with shopping baskets navigate the chaos with practiced ease. And then there are the others. The ones like you. The ones whose clothes are a little more worn, whose faces are a little more tired, whose steps are a little less certain. You are all part of the same current, yet you are utterly alone. You look down at the street. It's coated in a thick, black, sticky mud. It's a notorious concoction, a uniquely London recipe of dirt, soot, horse droppings, and whatever else has been dropped or spilled. A carriage splashes past, and you feel a spray of this filth on the hem of your skirt. This is where you encounter a profession you never knew existed, the crossing sweeper. A small boy, his face smudged with dirt, darts out with a worn broom and, for the price of a halfpenny, sweeps a clean path through the mire for a wealthy-looking couple. They toss him a coin without a second glance. This tiny transaction, this momentary clearing of the filth, is a perfect, brutal illustration of the city's economy. Some people pay to avoid the mud, others are paid to live in it. You keep walking, destination unknown, simply following the flow. Your eyes are drawn toward the river, even from several streets away. Its presence is immense. The locals still talk in hushed tones about the summer of Wushaba, what they called the Great Stink. They say the heat was so bad, and the river so choked with waste, that the smell was a monstrous, physical presence. It was so foul that Parliament had to hang sheets soaked in chloride of lime over their windows just to be able to breathe. It was the moment the city's filth became too much to ignore, even for the rich and powerful. This is a point historians still circle back to. A debate played out in quiet university halls. Was it the sheer, unbearable offense of the smell that finally shamed the government into building the great sewer systems that would define modern London? Or was it the quieter, more terrifying threat of cholera, the blue death that stalked the city's water pumps, that truly forced their hand? One was a matter of comfort and dignity. The other was a matter of life and death. The truth, as is often the case, is likely a murky mix of both. But you're not thinking about history. You're thinking about the present. You're a single drop of water in an ocean of 8 million souls. The sheer scale of it all is dizzying. The buildings seem to lean in, blotting out the sky. The noise is a constant pressure against your skull. You came out here to find a foothold, a place to start, a way to earn your bread. But as you stand on a street corner, jostled and ignored by the relentless crowd, you realize you haven't found a path. You've just discovered how truly, terrifyingly lost you are. The overwhelming sensory assault of the street eventually dulls into a throbbing background hum. The initial shock gives way to a more pressing, practical fear. The city is a machine, and to survive in it, you need fuel. That fuel is money. Without it, you will simply stop. Another broken cog to be swept aside. The question is, how do you get it? You have no trade, no skill that seems to have any value in this thunderous, bustling world. You have only your 2 hands, and your willingness to work until they are raw. You follow the crowds, letting the current pull you toward the areas where the buildings are less grand and the smells are more industrial. You are looking for the places where the work is done, the hidden engines that power the city's grand facade. You pass a bakery, and the warm scent of bread is so intoxicating it makes you dizzy. You see a woman scrubbing the front steps of a large house, her knuckles red and chapped. You see men hauling heavy sacks from a warehouse, their backs bent under the strain. Everyone is working. The city is a beehive of frantic, desperate activity. Eventually, you find yourself in a narrow lane where women are gathered around a warehouse door. They are clustered in small groups, talking in low tones. Their expressions are a mixture of hope and weary resignation. This, you sense, is a place to start. You join the periphery of the crowd, trying to be unobtrusive, listening. The talk is of the sweater, not a piece of clothing, but a man, the middleman, the one who hands out the piecework. This is the grim economy that keeps the poorest of London alive, or at least, not quite dead. Piecework is exactly what it sounds like. You are paid not for your time, but for each individual piece you complete. It's a system designed for maximum profit for the factory owners, and maximum desperation for the workers. You might spend 10 exhausting hours sewing shirts, but if you only complete a certain number, you are paid for that number, and nothing more. There is no wage, only the tally. A heavy door creaks open, and a hush falls over the crowd. A stout man with a ledger under his arm appears. This is the sweater. His eyes scan the faces, lingering here and there. A tiny god distributing his meager blessings. You watch as a woman you recognize from your tenement building steps forward. She holds out a large, finished bundle of trousers. The sweater inspects them with a critical eye. Pulling at a seam here, checking a button there, he finds a small flaw, a stitch out of place, and with a grunt of disapproval, he declares the entire piece as slovenly. He will deduct a penny for the mistake. The woman's face crumples, but she says nothing. A penny is the price of a loaf of bread. A penny is an hour of your life. She takes her reduced payment and scurries away before he can find another fault. It's your turn. You have nothing to return, only to ask. You approach him, your voice barely a whisper, and you won't. So, he looks you up and down, his gaze lingering on your hands. In this world, your hands are your resume. Are they nimble? Are they strong? Are they already shaking with age or hunger? He seems to decide you are worth a risk. He jerks his head toward a massive pile of sacks in the corner of the warehouse. Rags sorting. He says, hop in a basket. Fill them to the line. No rubbish. A half-penny a basket. You do the mental arithmetic. The brutal calculation that will become the rhythm of your life. How long to fill a basket? How many baskets to earn a penny? How many pennies to afford bread? To afford rent? The numbers spin in your head. A dizzying, impossible equation. It feels like being asked to fill the ocean with a thimble. But you nod. You say, thank you, sir, because you have to. This is the system that academics would later call the sweated trades. They'd write papers and books about it, debating its economic efficiencies and its moral failings. But for you, it's not an academic concept. It's the cold, hard reality of your survival. Historians still argue about the true origins of the term sweater. Some claim it comes from the workers, literally sweating in crowd, under-tilted rooms. Others, more cynically, suggest it refers to the middleman, the one who sweats the profit out of the labor of the poor, standing there, watching him dismiss another woman with a cruel word. You know which definition you believe. You also learn a small, strange piece of the piecework puzzle, the existence of swap work. This was the term for the cheapest, lowest quality ready-made clothing, often destined for sailors or the colonies. The pay for sewing swaps was so infinitesimally small that it was considered the absolute bottom of the barrel for a seamstress. It was work that paid just enough to keep you from starving today, while ensuring you'd be just as hungry tomorrow. You are not yet a seamstress. You are a rag sorter. Your job is to stand before a mountain of the city's discarded filth and make sense of it. The sweater points you to an empty basket, and with a deep breath that tastes of dust and decay, you take your place. The roar of the city outside is still there, but it fades a little. Your world has shrunk to this pile of rags and the brutal mathematics of the halfpenny. You approach the mountain. It's not just a pile of rags. It's an archaeology of forgotten lives, a vast, filthy testament to the city's cast-offs. The smell is overwhelming. The damp, musty odor of mildew, sweat, and things you don't want to identify. Your job is to sort this chaos into categories. Wool, cotton, linen, silk if you're lucky. These scraps will be sold to paper mills or shoddy mills, where they will be shredded, poked, and reborn as new products. Your role is the first, and filthiest, step in this industrial resurrection. You plunge your hands into the pile. The texture is a nightmare. Some pieces are stiff with grime, others are uneven and damp. You pull out a child's dress, beautifully made once, but now torn and stained with something dark. For a fleeting second, you wonder about the child who wore it. Was she happy? Where is she now? But you can't afford to wonder. Wondering doesn't fill the basket. You toss it into the cotton pile. Your hands, unaccustomed to such rough work, are already beginning to sting. You unearth a man's waistcoat. The fine silk lining now shredded. You can still see the faint outline where a pocket watch once sat. You imagine the man who wore it, proud and prosperous. And then you imagine the series of misfortunes that led to this fine garment ending up in a rag pile. Or perhaps it was simply worn out and discarded without a thought. You'll never know. Each scrap is a silent story, a ghost of a life you'll never understand. You are not just sorting fabric. You are sorting memories. The work is mind-numbing and physically exhausting. You have to bend and lift, pull and tear, dust and lint fill the air, getting into your throat and making you cough. Your back begins to ache with a low, insistent burn. But you keep going, your movements becoming more mechanical. You learn to identify fabrics by touch alone, without even looking. The rush, sturdy feel of cotton, the smoother, cooler glide of linen, the greasy, heavy weight of old wool. You see other women working nearby, their faces smudged with dirt, their movements practiced and efficient. They don't speak. There is no camaraderie here, only a shared, silent desperation. Every woman is in her own world, a world defined by the size of her basket and the speed of her hands. You learn a hard lesson quickly. A moment of distraction is a moment you aren't earning. Here in the dust, you discover a strange and slightly horrifying tidbit of the Victorian economy, the absolute lowest grade of rags. The most filthy and rotten pieces were not just thrown away. They were sold as fertilizer. Specifically, they were prized by hop growers in Kent, who believed the woolen rags, as they decomposed, released nitrogen into the soil and produced a better crop for London's breweries. The thought is bizarre. The tattered remains of a pauper's coat could eventually become part of a rich man's pint of beer. The city consumed everything, even its own decay. After what feels like an eternity, your first basket is full. You followed the instructions, packing the scraps down, making sure it was filled to the chalk line on the inside. You haul it, heavier than you expected, over to the sweater. He glances into it, stirs the top layer with a dirty finger, and grunts. It is a grunt of acceptance. He makes a small tick in his ledger next to a number. You aren't a name. You are a number, and gestures for you to get back to work. That tick in the ledger is worth 1/2 penny. The reality of it sinks into your soul like a cold stone. The sweat on your brow, the ache in your back, the grime under your fingernails. All for that. You look back at the mountain of rags. It doesn't seem to have shrunk at all. It is an endless, unconquerable peak. Historians often discuss the Industrial Revolution in terms of steam engines, factories, and grand inventions. But this is the other side of that coin. This is the hidden engine, the one powered not by coal, but by the slow, grinding labor of countless invisible people. There's a long-running debate about whether industrialization truly improved the lives of the poorest classes. From your vantage point, covered in the filth of 100 strangers and with the value of your labor measured in fractions of a penny, you suspect you know the answer. The great machines of progress are being oiled with the sweat of women like you. You pick up your empty basket and walk back to the pile. Your hands are sore. Your throat is dry. But you plunge them back into the filth. There is no choice. The sun, a pale disk in the smoggy sky, is beginning to dip lower. You need to earn enough for a loaf of bread and perhaps a candle. And then you need to earn enough for tomorrow's rent. And the day after, the mountain is waiting. You return to your room long after the sun has set, though in these narrow, overshadowed lanes, daylight is a fleeting visitor at best. Your body aches in ways you didn't know it could. Your back is a single, solid plank of pain. Your hands are raw, with tiny cuts and splinters you can't even see, under your fingernails. The grime is so deeply embedded it feels like a part of you now. You earned tuppence halfpenny, 2.5 pennies, enough for a small, stale loaf of bread from a baker selling off his day-old stock, and nothing more. You sit on the floor in the dark, because a candle is a luxury you can't afford tonight, and eat a piece of the dry bread. It tastes like sawdust, but it fills the hollow ache in your stomach, as you chew, slowly, making it last. The sounds of the tenement begin to seep back into your consciousness, now that the roar of the city has faded to a distant murmur. The building itself seems to come alive. The thin walls, which felt like a curse this morning, now feel like a strange kind of company. They are a membrane through which the life of the building breathes. You learn to interpret the sounds, to build a picture of the people you share this vertical space with, people you may never see. From the room next to yours, you hear a persistent, wheezing cough. It's a wet, ragged sound that speaks of lungs clogged with coal dust or factory lint. It goes on and on, a terrible, rhythmic punctuation to the evening's quiet. You imagine an old man, or perhaps a woman who has spent too many years in a textile mill, sitting alone in a room just like yours, fighting for every breath. You never hear a voice from that room, only the cough. From below, there is the sound of a baby crying. It's not the angry, demanding cry of a healthy infant, but a thin, weak wail that seems to have no energy behind it. It rises and falls, a dreadful, miserable sound that speaks of hunger or sickness. You hear a woman's voice, not singing a lullaby, but murmuring in a low, exhausted monotone, trying to soothe a child who cannot be soothed. You wonder if she has enough to eat herself, if she has enough milk. The baby's cries are a tiny, heartbreaking soundtrack to the poverty that envelops you all. Later, you hear a different sound, a sob, angry voice, the moans, followed by a woman's pleading tones. Then, a thud, silence. The silence is worse than the shouting. You hold your breath, listening, your heart pounding. You hear a single, stifled sob, and then nothing. You pull your shawl tighter around yourself. There is nothing you can do. To interfere would be to invite trouble you cannot handle. You are all trapped in your own small boxes, witnesses to each other's suffering but powerless to help. This is the reality of tenement life, a subject of endless fascination for social reformers of the era. Men like Charles Booth would later create incredibly detailed poverty maps of London, coloring streets block by block to indicate the level of wealth or destitution of its inhabitants. Historians still use these maps, marveling at their detail. But there's a debate about their true nature. Or are they tools of genuine social concern, designed to highlight the problem and inspire change? Or were they a form of classification, a way for the wealthier classes to quantify and understand the poor as a kind of alien species, to be studied from a safe distance, from inside one of the black-coded streets, signifying the lowest class? You feel less like a subject of concern and more like a specimen under a microscope. In the midst of this symphony of sorrow, you learn a strange, cold fact of life here. You learn it by the sudden silences. One evening, the coughing in the next room simply stops. For a day, you think perhaps he, or she, is feeling better, but the silence stretches into a second day, and a third. Then you hear new sounds. The landlord's heavy tread, a muttered conversation, the scraping of something being removed. You don't need to ask. You know what happened. In a place like this, death is not announced with weeping or ceremony. It is marked by an absence of sound. A life is extinguished, and the only evidence is one less cough in the night. You lie down on the hard floorboards, using your small bundle of clothes as a pillow. You are not just a resident of this building. You are becoming part of its language. You are learning the grammar of a slammed door, the vocabulary of a child's cry, the syntax of a neighbor's cough. You don't know their names or their faces, but you know the sounds of their survival and their defeat. And you wonder, with a cold knot of fear in your stomach, what sound your own life is making. Is it just the quiet scratching of your own breathing? And how long will it be before that, too, falls silent? A few days of rag sorting pass in a blur of dust and dates. You earn just enough to keep your room and to buy bread that is always a day or two stale. The work is brutal, but it's predictable. Then, one morning, you arrive at the warehouse to find the great rag mountain gone. A different group of workers is loading the sorted sacks onto a dray. The sweater sees you and shakes his head before you can even ask. No rags today, he grunts. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Just like that, your lifeline is cut. There is no warning, no apology. The precariances of your existence is laid bare. Your income, your very survival, depends on the random ebb and flow of the city's refuse. A cold spike of panic pierces the dull fog of your exhaustion. You cannot afford a day without work. You certainly cannot afford a week. You turn away from the warehouse. The familiar, sour smell of the rags now replaced by the sharp, chemical scent of fear. You wander the streets again, but this time your search is more frantic. You look for the clusters of women, the signs of distributed labor, and you find one, in a courtyard even more squalid than the one you'd been working in. Here, a group of women and very young girls are gathered around a man handing out thin wooden boards and small pots of glue. The work is matchbox making. You watch for a moment. It seems simple enough. You are given thin wooden veneers, already scored, and a pot of foul-smelling glue. Your job is to fold the inner tray, glue the sandpaper on the outer sleeve, and assemble the box. The pay, tuppence halfpenny for gross. That's 140 for boxes, 140 for tiny, fiddly boxes for the same amount you earned after a full day of hauling filthy rags. The mouth is horrified. But it is work. It is something. You get in line. You are given your materials and you find a spot on a damp step to begin. The girls around you, some no older than 7 or 8, work with a terrifying speed. Their small fingers fly. Folding, gluing, assembling. Their movements a blur of practiced desperation. Their speed is your competition. You try to copy them, but your fingers feel clumsy and slow. The glue gets on everything, and the cheap wood splinters, driving tiny, painful shards under your fingernails. You notice something about the women and girls who have been doing this for a while. Several of them have a strange swelling in their jaw. One older woman, who is working with a grim, silent intensity, has a bandage wrapped around the lower half of her face. You overhear 2 of the younger girls whispering. The word they use is false side jaw. It's a name that sounds almost whimsical, but the reality is a nightmare. That glue you are using, and the tips of the matches these boxes will eventually hold, are made with white phosphorus. Constant exposure to its fumes causes a horrific industrial disease, phosphorus necrosis of the jaw. It begins with a two-thought. Then the jawbone begins to literally rot away, glowing with a faint, greenish-white light in the dark. The pain is said to be unimaginable, and the smell of the decay is so foul that sufferers were often isolated from their own families. The only cure was the surgical removal of the entire jawbone, a brutal, disfiguring operation that many did not survive. This condition would become a famous cause for social reformers, culminating in the landmark Match Girls strike of 1888. But that is in the future. For now, it is simply a known hazard of the trade, a risk you take for tuppence a gross. Historians still debate the exact level of public awareness of false side jaw. Did the people buying the boxes of matches know the true cost of their convenience? Some argue that the plight of the matchmakers was a well-known scandal, while others suggest it was a horror hidden away in the city's poorest slums, easily ignored by the middle and upper classes. Looking at the vacant, almost ghostly expression on the bandaged woman's face, you feel that her suffering is a secret she is forced to keep. You focus on your work, trying to ignore the dull ache that is already starting in your own teeth, an ache probably born of hunger and poor nutrition, but which now feels sinister. The sheer number of boxes you must make is staggering. You finish one, then another. Each one is a tiny victory, but the pile of finished boxes grows with agonizing slowness. You also learn a peculiar and cruel trick of the trade. The sweater who provides the materials often requires the workers to buy their own glue and string from him, at an inflated price. This meant that a portion of your pathetic earnings went straight back into his pocket before you even saw it. It was another turn of the screw, another way to squeeze profit from the utterly powerless. Error's pulse. Your back screams in protest from hotching over on the step. Your fingers are sticky and sore. Your head throbs from the chemical smell of the glue. By the end of the day, you have made not quite a full gross. Your pay is less than 2 pennies, less than you made sorting rags. And for this, you have risked a disease that can rot the very bones of your face. You hand in your pathetic pile of boxes, take your coins, and walk away. The sweet, sickly smell of phosphorus clinging to your clothes and hair. Tonight, you can afford bread, but the taste of it will be tainted by the knowledge of what it cost. You walk back towards your tenement, the few coins clutched so tightly in your hand they feel warm. The setting sun is doing its best to pierce the smog, casting long, distorted shadows down the narrow streets. The city is shifting gears from the frantic energy of the workday to the boisterous, weary energy of the evening. Gas lamps are being lit, casting pools of yellow, uncertain light onto the slick cobblestones. Your first and only priority is food. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is a physical pain, a hollow space that makes it hard to think about anything else. You can't go to a proper shop. Their prices are for people with regular wages. Your economy is the economy of the street. You navigate by scent and sound, looking for the vendors who cater to people like you. People who buy their meals penny by penny. You pass a pie shop. The warm, savory smell of meat and gravy wafting out from its steamy windows. It's an aroma so rich and comforting it almost brings tears to your eyes. But a pie is a luxury far beyond your reach. You see men in work clothes inside, hunched over their plates, shoveling the food in. For them, a pie is a simple, hearty meal. For you, it might as well be a feast at the Queen's table. You find what you're looking for on a corner where the crowds are thickest. A woman with a large wicker basket is selling day-old bread. The loaves slightly hard and misshapen. A penny for a small loaf. This is your staple, the foundation of your diet. You hand over the coin and she gives you the bread. You break off a piece immediately, your hunger too sharp to wait. It's dry and coarse, but it's food, it's fuel. With your remaining penny and a half, you have choices to make, a grim game of nutritional chess. A little further down, a man is selling hot potatoes from a portable tin oven. A large, steaming potato for a half-penny. The warmth alone is tempting, a small comfort against the damp evening chill. Next to him, a girl is selling watercress from a basket, shouting about its health-giving properties. A small bunch for a half-penny. You've heard it said that watercress can sweeten the blood, a folk remedy for the ailments of the poor. You decide on the potato. It's more substantial. The man fishes one out of his oven with a hook, its skin blistered and black, and hands it to you. You juggle it from hand to hand. The heat a welcome shock to your cold fingers. You eat it right there on the street. Skin and all, the fluffy, steaming interior a small miracle of warmth and substance. This, combined with your bread, is your dinner. This diet, or lack thereof, was the subject of much debate and study during the period. Reformers and early nutritionists were beginning to understand the link between food and health, and they were horrified by what they found in the slums. They wrote pamphlets and gave lectures on the scientific way to eat, advising the poor to buy lentils and make nourishing broths. But their advice often missed the point entirely. Historians still argue about this disconnect. Was it sheer ignorance on the part of the middle-class reformers, who simply couldn't comprehend the realities of slum life, or was there a touch of arrogance? A belief that the poor were poor because they didn't know how to manage their money or their kitchens properly. The truth you're living is that you can't make a nourishing broth if you don't have a pot to cook it in, or the fuel to heat the fire. You can't store lentils if your room is damp and overrun with mice. Your choices are dictated not by nutrition, but by immediacy and cost. You eat what is cheap, what can be bought in tiny quantities, and what requires no cooking. Your dinner of bread and a potato isn't a choice, it's a conclusion, the answer to a brutal equation of earnings and prices. You also know about a more desperate level of street food. You see the signs for it. Faggots, a dish made from leftover scraps of meat, tofu, and bread, boiled and sold for a penny. You see eel pie stalls, the eels caught from the heavily polluted Thames, and you've heard whispers of the penny lick, a treat for children where a small dab of ice cream was served in a thick glass tumbler. The child would lick the glass clean, and the vendor would simply wipe it with a rag and serve the next customer. It was an efficient way to sell ice cream, and a terrifyingly efficient way to spread diseases like tuberculosis. You finish your potato. The last warm bite is small, fleeting moment of pleasure. You still have a penny left. You could buy another small loaf for tomorrow's breakfast, or you could buy a candle. A candle means you could perhaps find some sewing work to do in your room at night. But it also means a little less food. Every penny is a choice between two different kinds of hunger. The hunger of the belly, or the hunger for a slightly better chance tomorrow. You decide on the candle. The thought of sitting in the suffocating darkness again tonight is too much to bear. You buy a single, thin tallow candle from a chandler's shop. It smells greasy and unpleasant, but it represents a tiny flicker of hope. You walk back to your room, your dinner of bread and smog finished, cutting your loaf for tomorrow and your single, precious candle. The city roars around you, a great beast that has been fed, for one more day, by your labor. The next morning, the fear returns. It is a cold, familiar companion, settling in your stomach the moment you wake up on the hard floor. The matchbox work is a fool's errand, a path to sickness that doesn't even pay enough to quiet your hunger. You need something else. Recalling the conversation of the women at the rag warehouse, you remember a different kind of work being mentioned, one that you could perhaps do in your own room, away from the dust or the phosphorus fumes. Sewing. Armed with your candles from the night before, which now seems like a wise investment, you set out with a new purpose. You are not just looking for any work. You are looking for sewing work. You ask a woman at the communal water pump, the place that serves as the tenement's grim morning social club. She jerks her head towards a street a few blocks away. Go see the sweater on Fleet Street, she says, her voice flat. He gives out the shirts. You find the address she gave you. It's not a large warehouse, but a small, cramped storefront. Its windows piled high with bolts of cheap, coarse fabric. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of untreated cotton and human sweat. The same scene plays out as before, a handful of women, waiting, their faces etched with a familiar mixture of anxiety and exhaustion. And behind a tall counter, another sweater. This one is different from the ragman. H.E.S. thin and wheezing, with ink stains on his fingers. But he has the same look in his eyes, a tired, dismissive power. He holds the fate of everyone in this room in his hands. You know, instinctively, that he is not the true owner of the business. H.E.S. just another cog in the machine, a slightly larger one than you. Perhaps he is the middleman, the one who takes the large orders from the factories and disseminates the work in tiny, manageable parcels to the desperate women of the slums. He skims his own profit from the top. Of course, his survival depends on paying you as little as he possibly can. This system, the sweating system, was a defining feature of the late Victorian economy, and a source of great social outcry. There is a long-running historical debate about the role of these middlemen. Were they purely villains, predatory figures exploiting the vulnerable for their own gain, or were they a necessary, if unpleasant, part of a chaotic and unregulated economy, providing a crucial link between the vast, impersonal factories and a workforce that was unable to find employment through conventional means? Standing in this stuffy room, watching the sweater casually dismiss a woman's complaint about the quality of the thread she was given, you find it very hard to see him as a necessary link. He looks a lot more like a predator. Finally, it's your turn. You ask for work, and he looks at your hands, just as the other man did. He seems to approve of what he sees, or perhaps he is simply desperate for more hands. He slides a large bundle of pre-cut fabric pieces across the counter, along with a spool of cheap, flimsy thread. Shirts, he says, his voice a dull monotone. For the army. Finish the seams. Attach the collars and cuffs. 3p a shirt. I want him back by Saturday. Any mistakes? I dock you a penny. 3p a shirt. It sounds like a fortune compared to the halfpenny for a basket of rags or the pittance for a gross of matchboxes. A flicker of hope ignites within you. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the work that will allow you to eat a proper meal, to save a few pennies for an emergency. You take the heavy bundle, murmur your thanks, and hurry out before he can change his mind. You don't know it, but you've just stumbled into one of the most notoriously exploitative corners of the sweated trade. The sewing of uniforms for the military and other government services, was often subcontracted out to sweaters like this one, who would then dock the price of labor down to rock bottom. A strange and maddening detail of this system was that the government often paid the primary contractor a decent price for the uniforms. But by the time the work and the money had trickled down through 2 or 3 layers of subcontractors and sweaters, the woman at the very bottom, the one actually doing the sewing, was left with a pittance. Your threepence is the last pathetic drop from a bucket that started out full. You get the bundle back to your room. It feels different, having work to do here, in your own small space. It feels a little more dignified than sorting rags in a dusty warehouse. You carefully lay out the pieces for the first shirt on the floor. The fabric is coarse, almost like canvas. The thread is thin and prone to snapping. The instructions are simple because the work is meant to be done at speed, not with skill. You thread your needle, a precious tool you've kept safe for years, and begin to sew. Your fingers, stiff and sore from the rags in the matchboxes, feel clumsy at first, but slowly, the old, familiar rhythm of sewing returns. The tiny, precise movements, the pull of the thread through the fabric, the gradual transformation of flat, lifeless pieces into something with shape and form. For the first time in days, you are doing something that requires a modicum of skill, not just brute force. But the sweater's words echo in your mind. Any mistakes? I dock you a penny. Your hope is tempered by a cold dread. The tyranny of the sweater hasn't been escaped. It has simply followed you home. As you settle into the rhythm of sewing, your world shrinks to the size of a shirt. The city's roar fades to a background hum, punctuated by the familiar sounds of the tenement. Your focus is entirely on the tiny point of your needle, rising and falling, stitching the coarse fabric together, stitch after stitch, seam after seam. This is a different kind of labor from the rag sorting. It is quiet, meticulous, and in its own way, even more demanding. There is no room for a wandering mind. A moment's inattention, a crooked stitch, could cost you a third of your earnings for this garment. You work all day, stopping only when the grey light filtering through your grimy window becomes too weak to see by. You eat a small piece of your stale bread, your eyes burning with fatigue. Then you light your precious candle. The small flame casts a flickering, golden light that dances on the damp walls of your room. It pushes back the oppressive darkness, creating a small, intimate circle of illumination. But it's a treacherous light. It's weak, and it makes the shadows jump and sway, playing tricks on your tired eyes. The tiny eye of the needle becomes a maddeningly small target. Threading it in the wavering candlelight is a trial in itself. You hunt over your work, bringing it close to your face to catch the best of the light. Your back, already sore, begins to ache with a new, sharp intensity from the cramped position. The candle is your lifeline, the tool that allows you to work past sunset. But it is also a cruel tyrant. You can almost feel it burning away your time, your money, your eyesight. Each drop of melted tallow is a fraction of a penny, gone forever. As you sew, your mind drifts, and you catch yourself thinking about the man who will eventually wear this shirt. A soldier, the sweater said. You picture him, young and strong, standing on a parade ground somewhere, or perhaps in a distant, sun-baked land of the empire. He will never know that his uniform was stitched by a woman on the verge of starvation, in a cold, dark room, by the light of a single, sputtering candle. The vast, impersonal machinery of the British Empire, its power and its glory, is built on a foundation of countless moments of quiet, desperate labor like this one. A carriage rattles by on the street below, the sound louder and sharper in the night air. You pause for a moment and stretch your aching back, walking to the window. You wipe your small, clean circle on the pane and peer out. Through the gap between 2 buildings, you can see a sliver of a much grander street. Gas lamps, brighter and more numerous than in your lane, line the pavement. A handsome cab, its lamps glowing like cat's eyes, pulls up in front of a large, brightly lit house. The door opens, spilling a rectangle of warm, golden light onto the street. You see figures in silhouette. A man in a top hat, a woman in a voluminous dress with a bustle. You hear the faint sound of music, a piano, and a burst of laughter that sounds like it comes from another world. It is another world. It is a world of comfort, of warmth, of food that is eaten for pleasure and not just survival. It exists just a few hundred yards from where you stand, but the distance between your life and theirs might as well be the distance to the moon. They live on the surface of the city, in the light and the air. You live in its hidden engine room, in the darkened drive, keeping the whole grand contraption running. The starkness of this contrast was a source of endless commentary and anxiety for Victorian society. Thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels looked at this very scene, the juxtaposition of extreme wealth and extreme poverty, and saw the engine of history, a class struggle that was destined to erupt in revolution. Others, like the novelist Charles Dickens, saw it as a moral crisis, a failure of compassion and Christian charity that stained the soul of the nation. Historians still debate the true nature of this division. Was it a carefully maintained system, designed to keep the classes separate and the laboring poor in their place, or was it a chaotic, unintended consequence of rapid industrialization and urbanization? A problem that had grown too big, too fast, for anyone to solve. You don't know about these grand theories. You only know what you see. You see the laughter and the light, and you feel the cold glass of your window pane against your forehead. You are a ghost at their feast, an invisible witness to a life you will never touch. A strange, unbidden thought enters your mind. One of the buttons on that man's fine waistcoat was likely sewn on by a woman just like you, in a room just like this. You turn away from the window. The glimpse of that other world has left a bitter taste in your mouth. Your candle is burned down by a quarter. It's a reminder that time is money, and you are wasting it. You sit back down on the floor, pick up the shirt, and with a sigh that makes the candle flame flicker, you begin to sew again. The ghosts in their top hats can have their role. You seems to finish. The next morning begins not with the sun, but with the clatter of a wooden bucket on the cobblestones of the courtyard. It's the signal that your day must start. A sound more reliable than any rooster's crow. Before you can even think about sewing, you must perform the day's first essential chore, fetching the water. You pick up your own pail, a rickety, dented thing you bought for a farthing, and join the small procession of women and children heading down the stairs. The air in the stairwell is thick with the smell of sleep and stale air. No one speaks. The energy for conversation is a resource to be conserved, not wasted on morning pleasantries. The water pump stands in the center of the small, muddy courtyard behind the tenement. It is a single, iron pump, stained with rust, serving dozens of families. It is the building's heart, its life source, and its most dangerous feature. A small, silent queue is already formed. You take your place at the end, setting your bucket down. This is the water pump parliament. While the men in Westminster debate the affairs of the empire, the real news of the slum is exchanged here. In short, weary sentences. While waiting for the pump handle to be free, you learn more about the realities of your world in these 10 minutes than you could in a lifetime of reading newspapers. The woman in front of you, the one you recognize from your floor, mutters that the price of coal has gone up again. A halfpenny more a sack. Another woman whispers that the bailiffs came for the family on the second floor yesterday, putting their few meager possessions out on the street. You learn that one of the children in the building has the fever, and his mother is frantic, trying to keep him cool with damp rags. You hear which sweaters are hiring, which ones are cheating workers more than usual, and which street vendors are selling tainted meat. This is not gossip. This is vital, life-saving intelligence. A shared pool of knowledge that helps you all navigate the treacherous currents of your lives. The conversation is also a source of strange, and often incorrect, medical advice. The woman whose child has the fever is told to wrap him in onions to draw out the poison. Another complains of a persistent cough and is advised to drink gin, not for pleasure, but because it cleans the lungs. This is the folk medicine of the poor, a mixture of superstition, tradition, and desperation. In an age where a visit to a doctor was an impossible luxury, these remedies were all you had. The debate among historians about the famous Broad Street pump incident of 1854 is relevant here. The physician John Snow famously proved that a cholera outbreak was being spread by a single contaminated public water pump. He had the handle removed, and the outbreak stopped. It's often hailed as a triumph of scientific deduction, but there's a quieter, ongoing debate. How much did the local residents already know? Did they have their own suspicions about the bad water? Their own theories based on the kind of practical, observational knowledge you're hearing right now. Snow's work was brilliant, but it's possible he was confirming a truth the community already suspected in its bones. A truth they simply lacked the power and the scientific language to prove. It's your turn at the pump. You place your bucket under the spout and begin to work the heavy iron handle. It groans in protest. A sound of metal on metal. The work is hard, requiring your full body weight to draw the water up from the well below. Finally, a gush of water, cloudy and smelling faintly of iron and earth, splashes into your bucket. You know, intellectually, that this water is not clean. The wells are shallow, and the ground is saturated with the leakage from cesspits and graveyards. Drinking this water is a daily gamble with diseases like typhoid and cholera. But there is no alternative. This is the only water you have. You hold a heavy bucket, sloshing water onto your skirt and the already muddy ground. Back up the 4 flights of stairs. Your arms burn with the effort. By the time you reach your room, you are out of breath, and a good portion of the water has been spilled. The bucket you've carried with such effort provides just enough water for the day. A little to drink, a little to wash your face and hands, and perhaps a little to boil with a crust of bread to make a thin, watery porridge known as skilly. This daily struggle for a single bucket of water is a fundamental, exhausting reality that separates your life from the lives of the wealthy. In their homes, water flows from taps, clean and seemingly endless. For you, it is a heavy, finite, and dangerous resource that must be fought for every single day. You set the bucket in the corner of your room, a small, murky pool that represents another morning's victory. You take a small drink, trying not to think about what might be swimming in it, and then you turn back to the pile of unfinished shirts. The parliament is over. The workday has begun. The shirts have become your entire world. You wake up with them. You work on them all day, and with your candle lit, you work on them into the night. Your room, already small, feels even more cramped, filled with the ghostly white piles of finished and unfinished garments. The air is thick with the smell of the coarse cotton and the greasy tallow of your burning candle. You've fallen into a routine, a rhythm of survival. Wait, fetch water, eat a crust of bread, so until the light fails. Light the candle, so until your eyes blur and your head droops with exhaustion. Sleep for a few hours on the hard floor, and then begin again. The days of the week lose their names. There is only today, the day you must work, and Saturday, the day you must deliver the finished shirts and pray you get paid enough to survive the next week. The work is agonizingly slow. The thread the sweater provided is of such poor quality that it constantly knots and snaps. You spend precious minutes threading your needle in the flickering light. Your frustration a hot, tight knot in your chest. The fabric is so stiff it resists the needle, and the tips of your fingers on your right hand are calloused and sore, periodically pierced by the needle when your tired hand slips. You've developed a permanent ache in your neck and shoulders from hunching over the work for hours on end. Your most precious possession, after your needle, is your eyesight. You guard it fiercely. You try not to sew for too long at night, but the need for money always wins out over the need for rest. You find yourself holding the fabric closer and closer to your face. your eyes straining to distinguish the white thread from the white fabric in the pool light. When you finally stop for the night and blow out the candle, you see dancing spots behind your eyelids, and the darkness itself seems to throb with the memory of the tiny flame. This struggle was a common tragedy for seamstresses, a group romanticized in popular art and literature of the time, often depicted as virtuous, hard-working women patiently stitching in quaint little rooms. The reality, as you are living it, was far from romantic. The phrase driven to blindness by the needle was a common saying, a known outcome for women in your trade. The loss of eyesight meant the loss of your livelihood, a sentence of destitution from which there was little hope of appeal. Historians and literary scholars still debate the meaning of the virtuous seamstress trope in Victorian culture. Was it a genuine, if naive, attempt to generate sympathy for the plight of working women? Or was it a way to safely contain and romanticize their suffering, turning a brutal economic reality into a sentimental moral tale, thereby relieving the middle-class consumer of any real guilt about the shirts on their backs? The paintings never showed the snapped thread, the bleeding fingers, or the terrifying blurriness that signaled the beginning of the end. In your small room, you also discover one of the hidden costs of this work. The sweater only provides the main fabric and the thread. He expects you to provide your own needles and candles. A needle, if you are careful, can last a long time, but candles are consumed. They burn away, turning into smoke and faint light, and taking your money with them. You learn to be incredibly frugal with your light, working in near darkness for as long as possible, saving the candle for the most intricate parts of the sewing, like the buttonholes. This practice, known as working dark, was a common, by destroying necessity. It was a cruel irony. The very tool you needed to earn money also ate away at your profits. One evening, as you are finishing a collar, the sound of singing drifts up from the street. It's a man's voice, rough but cheerful, singing a popular music hall song. For a moment, you are tempted to go to the window, to catch a glimpse of this small moment of joy in the grim street, but you stop yourself. Your candle is burning. A minute spent at the window is a minute of light wasted, a minute of work lost. You force your attention back to the collar, your world shrinking once again to the tiny circle of light cast by your dwindling candle, a circle just big enough to hold a needle, a thread, and your own weary, determined hands. The song fades down the street, a reminder of a world of simple pleasures that you can no longer afford to even watch. A new sound begins to intrude upon the usual weekday roar of the city. It starts on Saturday evening, a subtle shift in the city's rhythm, and grows into a full-throated chorus by Sunday morning. It is the sound of church bells, hundreds of them, from the grand pronouncements of St. Paul's Cathedral to the tinny clang of a small parish church in a nearby lane, all calling the faithful to worship. On Sunday, a strange and unfamiliar quiet descends upon your street. The noise of the drays and carts diminishes. The cries of the street vendors are largely silenced. From your window, you see families dressed in their Sunday best, clothes carefully saved and preserved for this one day of the week, walking down the street. It is the Lord's Day, a day of mandated rest, of piety and reflection. For you, however, the concept of a day of rest is a bitter joke. Hunger does not rest on Sunday. The rent, which is due on Monday, does not rest on Sunday. The pile of unfinished shirts in the corner of your room, a silent, reproachless mountain, certainly does not rest on Sunday. You must work. To take a day off would be to fall behind in a race you are already losing, to dig a hole of debt from which you might never escape. So you continue to sew, the rhythmic pull of your needle a quiet rebellion against the enforced silence of the day. But the work feels different. The usual background noise of the city, the din that you've come to rely on as a kind of company, is gone. Your solitude feels deeper, more profound. The only sounds are the distant, mocking chorus of the church bells and the occasional burst of noise from a nearby pub, one of the few establishments doing a roaring trade on a Sunday. This tension between the ideal of the Victorian Sunday and the reality of the working poor's existence was a massive social issue. Religious groups and social reformers campaigned tirelessly for the preservation of the Sabbath. They saw it as a cornerstone of a moral, Christian society. Laws were in place, some dating back centuries, that restricted trade and entertainment on Sundays. For the middle and upper classes, this was a welcome respite, a day for family, for church, for quiet contemplation. But for the poorest, it was often a day of intense economic anxiety. Historians continue to debate the true impact and intent of these Sabbatarian laws. Were they genuinely motivated by religious piety and a concern for the spiritual well-being of the nation? Or were they also a form of social control? A way to impose middle-class values of discipline and order upon a working class that was often seen as unruly and godless. The fact that pubs were often allowed to remain open, providing a convenient outlet for the wages of working men, adds a layer of hypocrisy to the debate that is hard to ignore. As you sow, you remember a strange piece of information you learned at the water pump. A woman was complaining that she couldn't buy thread on a Sunday. A button had come off her husband's only good shirt, and the draper's shop was shuttered. She was genuinely distressed. This was the peculiar cruelty of the system. You were forced to work on Sunday by economic necessity, but you were simultaneously prevented from buying the very materials you needed for that work. The city demanded you be idle and pious, while your landlord and your stomach demanded you be productive. You were trapped between God and mammon, and both seemed equally indifferent to your plight. Later in the afternoon, the quiet is broken by a new sound, a brass band. You look out your window and see a small procession from the Salvation Army marching down the street. Their uniforms crisp, their instruments gleaming. They are playing a hymn, their faces earnest and full of zeal. They are here to save the souls of the slum, to bring the word of God to the unchurched masses. They stop at a corner and a woman begins to preach, her voice ringing out in the still air, speaking of sin and redemption. You watch them for a moment. You know they mean well. You know they often provide practical help, like soup and shelter, along with their sermons. But you can't help but feel a profound sense of detachment. Her talk of spiritual salvation feels like a language from another planet. Your concerns are not for the state of your eternal soul, but for the state of your dwindling candle and the number of shirts you still have to finish by morning. You turn away from the window, from the sound of the trumpets and the preaching, and you pick up your needle again. The price of Sunday, you realize, is a loneliness deeper than any other day of the week. Saturday arrives, the day of reckoning. You spend the morning finishing the last of the shirts, your fingers flying, your heart a tight knot of anxiety. You've counted them a dozen times. They are all there. The seams, to your tired eyes, look straight. The collars are attached. You bundle them up, the coarse fabric feeling heavy and substantial in your arms. This bundle represents a week of your life. A week of strained eyes and candlelight. A week of living on stale bread. It represents hope. You carry your precious cargo back to the sweater's shop on Fleet Street. You wait your turn, cutting the shirts, your palms sweating, when you finally stand before him. You place the bundle on the counter with trembling hands. He pulls one out, then another, his eyes scanning them with a practiced, critical gaze. He is not looking for quality. He is looking for flaws, and he finds one. On the cuff of one shirt, a single stitch is slightly longer than the others. It is a tiny, insignificant imperfection, one that no soldier would ever notice, one that does not compromise the garment in any way, but it is enough. Sloppy, he says, the word landing like a slap. Dock you a penny. He continues his inspection. He finds another, similar flaw in a color. Another penny. He pulls at a seam, and the cheap thread you wove even snaps. Faulty work, he declares, though it is the fault of his materials. That's a whole shirt spoiled. I'm not paying for that one. You stand in stunned silence as he does his brutal arithmetic. Deductions for flaws, a penalty for the spoiled shirt. The three-pence spur shirt you had been clinging to as a lifeline shrinks and shrivels under his ink-stained finger. Your total pay for a week of eye-destroying labor is barely more than you would have made in a few days of sorting rags. You want to scream. You want to argue, to defend your work, to point out the flimsy thread and the terrible light. But you see the cold, final look in his eyes. You see the line of other women behind you, waiting, their faces impassive. To protest is to be labeled a troublemaker. To be a troublemaker is to be refused all future work, so you do nothing. You take the coins he pushes towards you, a pathetic little pile of copper, and you walk out of the shop, the bells of a nearby church mocking your defeat. The hope you had nurtured is extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard despair. The sewing is a lie, the truck. You need something else. That afternoon, at the water pump, you hear the women talking. The pea harvest has come in. There is work to be had in the cellars near the markets, shelling peas for the canneries and the street vendors. The pay is abysmal, they say, but it is steady. For now, you find the place easily, guided by the distinctly green, earthy smell. It's a vast, damp cellar, lit by a few bare gas jets that hiss and flicker, casting long, monstrous shadows. The floor is slick with condensation in discarded pots, and everywhere there are peas. Sacks of them are piled to the ceiling, creating green mountains that seem to absorb the feeble light. Women and children are sitting on low stools or crates, hunched over large basins, their hands moving in a constant, rhythmic blur. You are given a basin and pointed to a sack. The work is simple. Take a pod, use your thumb to split the seam, and run your finger down the inside, popping the small green peas into your basin. When the basin is full, you take it to be weighed. You are paid by the pound. You begin. Tut, tut, tut. The sound fills the cellar. A constant, soft percussion of 1,000 pods being opened. The repetitive motion is hypnotic. At first, there is a simple satisfaction in it, in the neatness of the tiny green spheres rolling into your basin. But the satisfaction quickly fades, replaced by a soul-crushing monotony. Your world shrinks to the pod in your hand. Your thumb finds the sieve. Your finger frees the peas. You reach for another. There is no thought. There is only the motion. Your fingers, accustomed to the needle, are now learning a new kind of pain. The friction of the pods makes your skin raw. The green juice from the pod stains your fingers, a pale green at first, but then darkening, seeping under your nails, a stain that will not wash out. After a few hours, your hands begin to cramp, and a dull ache settles deep into your joints. You overhear the foreman telling a woman to be careful to separate the brights from the dulls. This is a peculiar and sinister instruction. You learn that the older, less appealingly colored peas are not discarded. They are destined for a special treatment. Unscrupulous food processors would boil these dull peas with copper sulfate, a toxic chemical, to give them a vibrant, artificial green color, making them look fresh and appetizing to the unsuspecting customer. The beautiful, bright green peas you sometimes see in market stalls might well be a pretty poison. This brings into focus a long-standing historical discussion. Did your act of leaving the tyrannical sewing sweater for this new work represent a form of agency or resistance? Some scholars might argue that any choice, however small, within such an oppressive system is an exercise of personal will. But as you sit here, your back aching and your fingers growing numb, it feels less like a choice and more like swapping one cage for another, slightly different one. The academic debate feels hollow. You didn't resist the system. You just moved to a different part of it. The hours drag on. Your basin fills with agonizing slowness. You look up at the mountain of sacks still waiting. It is an ocean. You have been tasked with emptying an ocean with a teaspoon. You are no longer a woman who was once a seamstress. You are just a pair of hands, stained green, numb and aching, lost in an endless, quiet avalanche of peas. Days turn into a green, monotonous blur. You wake, your fingers already stiff and aching, and head to the cellar. You shell peas until the gas lights are lit, and then you stumble home, the soft popping sound of the pod still echoing in your ears. The pay is, as predicted, barely enough to sustain you. You are constantly tired, perpetually hungry, and your hands are permanently stained a sickly greenish brown. You have fallen to a new, lower level of the city's economic ladder, and the fall has jarred you to the bone. One evening, as you are climbing the stairs to your room, your legs heavy as lead, you notice a small commotion on the landing below yours. Two men, burly and dressed in drab, official-looking uniforms, are standing outside one of the doors. The door is open, and you can see the room inside is even barer than your own. An old woman is standing there, weeping silently, her body trembling. You recognize her. She is one of your neighbors, a woman even older than yourself, who you've seen at the water pump. She used to take in laundry, her hands perpetually wrinkled in dread from the harsh soap. But lately, you noticed her looking more frail, her cough more pronounced. The men are not unkind, but their manner is firm, impersonal. They are parish relieving officers. They are here to take her to the workhouse. A hush falls over the landing. Other doors have opened a crack. Your neighbors peering out, their faces a mixture of pity and stark terror. This is the moment everyone dreads. This is the ultimate failure, the final admission of defeat. The workhouse. To the middle-class taxpayers who funded them, workhouses were a necessary deterrent to idleness, a place where the undeserving poor were given shelter in exchange for hard labor. To you, and to everyone watching from their doorways, it is a prison for the poor. A place you go when you have absolutely nothing left, a place you enter and often never leave. The old woman doesn't resist. She seems to have no fight left in her. She allows one of the men to take her arm and lead her out. She carries nothing with her. She is leaving behind her room, her neighborhood, the last vestiges of her independent life. As she passes, her eyes meet yours for a fleeting second. In them, you see not just fear, but a profound and bottomless shame. The men lead her down the stairs and out into the street. The door to her room is left hanging open. The show is over. The neighbors retreat back into their rooms, the doors quietly clicking shut. But the feeling on the landing remains. A cold, heavy dread that seeps under the doors and into your own heart. The shadow of the workhouse has fallen over your building. You go into your own room and sit on the floor, your basin of unit and peace forgotten. You wrap your arms around yourself, suddenly feeling a chill that has nothing to do with the damp air. Everything you've heard about the workhouse floods your mind. You know that upon entry, families are separated, husbands from wives, parents from children. You know your own clothes will be taken from you, replaced with a rough, shapeless uniform that marks you as an inmate. You will have your hair cut short. You will be stripped of your name, your identity, your last shred of human dignity. The stated purpose of the workhouse was reform, based on the principle of less eligibility. The idea that conditions inside the workhouse had to be intentionally worse than the conditions of the lowest paid independent laborer outside. This was meant to ensure that only the truly desperate would seek entry. Historians have long debated the philosophy behind this. Was it a genuinely held, if misguided, economic theory designed to encourage self-reliance? Or was it, in practice, a system of punishment designed to discipline and control the poor? To make poverty so miserable and shameful that people would do anything to avoid it. Watching the sheer terror on your neighbors' faces, you are certain it is the latter. You've also heard the stories, the little details that make the place so terrifying. The food, for instance. It was deliberately monotonous and meager. Gruel, bread, and watery soup, not just to save money, but to make life inside as unpleasant as possible. And the work was designed to be pointless and spirit-crushing. You might spend all day picking oakum, teasing apart old, tarred ropes into individual fibers, a painful, filthy task that served little real purpose. Or you might be made to turn a crank that wasn't connected to anything, simply to enforce the discipline of labor. You look around your small, bare room. It is a grim, lonely place, but it is yours. The key is in your pocket. You can come and go as you please. You can choose to shall peas or to sew shirts. These small, pathetic freedoms suddenly feel like the most precious treasures in the world. The workhouse takes all of that away. It is the end of choice. It is the end of you. You get up and push your door shut, sliding the small bolt across. It's a flimsy piece of metal, but tonight it feels like the gate of a fortress. Outside, the city continues its relentless hum, but inside your room, the silence is filled with a new and powerful fear. You are no longer just fighting against hunger. You are now fighting against that final, shameful destination. You are fighting the house. The incident with the old woman haunts you for days. Every time you see an official-looking man on the street, your heart leaps into your throat. The fear adds a new layer of weight to your already heavy exhaustion. It also stirs something else within you, something long buried and almost forgotten. Memory. As you sit in the damp cellar, your hands moving automatically, your mind, desperate for an escape, begins to wander. It drifts back, past the grime and the noise of the city, past the years of struggle, to a time before all this, a time before London. A specific smell triggers it. One of the foremen in the cellar is eating an apple, and the crisp, sweet scent cuts through the earthy odor of the peas. It's a clean smell, a country smell, and suddenly, you are no longer in a dark, hissing cellar. You are standing in an orchard, the sun warm on your face. You can feel the soft grass under your feet. You can see the green leaves, the blue sky peeking through the branches. A sky not choked with smoke but vast and clear. You can hear the buzz of bees and the gentle rustle of the wind. The memory is so vivid, so complete, it makes you gasp. Your hands stop moving. The woman next to you gives you a sharp look, and you quickly resume your work. But the vision remains, superimposed over the grim reality of the cellar. You came from the countryside. You, like hundreds of thousands of others, were part of the Great Migration, the massive wave of humanity that flowed from the fields and villages into the booming, hungry cities during the 19th century. You left because the old way of life was dying. The enclosure of common lands, the mechanization of agriculture, the decline of cottage industries, it all conspired to push you out. The city, with its promise of work and wages, seemed like the only hope, a beacon in the distance. You remember the journey, the long, rattling train ride, the feeling of being a tiny, insignificant part of a great, churning machine. You remember the hope, the fear, the utter bewilderment of arriving in a place so vast and loud it felt like another world. The hope died quickly, the fear and bewilderment remained. This mass movement of people is a cornerstone of Victorian history, a demographic shift that redefined the nation. Historians have endlessly analyzed the push and pull factors. The push was the poverty and lack of opportunity in the countryside. The pull was the lure of factory work and the promise of a better life in the cities. But there is a continuing debate about the nature of this pull. Was it a genuine promise of upward mobility for the hardworking and the lucky, or was it a kind of cruel mirage, an illusion that drew people in only to trap them in a new, and in many ways worse, form of poverty? Your own journey from a green field to a green-stained cellar seems to provide a bitter answer. The apple-scented memory opens a floodgate. You remember other things. The taste of milk, fresh and warm from the cow, not the bluish, watered-down stuff sold from carts in the city. The feeling of rain on your face that wasn't laced with soot. The simple pleasure of looking at a horizon that wasn't a jagged line of rooftops and chimneys. You also remember a peculiar country superstition. You recall your grandmother telling you to always leave a small offering of bread and milk on the hearth for the little people, the fairies or brownies, to ensure the prosperity of the house. It was a belief that stretched back for centuries, a remnant of a pre-Christian, pagan world. Such beliefs were mocked as ignorant nonsense by the sophisticated, scientific minds of the city, but for your grandmother, they were part of the natural order of things. Here in London, there are no fairies in the hearth, only cockroaches in the walls. The new gods are the factory whistle, the sawman, and the penny. These memories are not comforting. They are agonizing. They highlight the sheer, brutal totality of what you have lost. You did not just lose a home. You lost a world. You lost the sky. You lost the silence. You lost the clean air. You lost a connection to the seasons, to the soil, to a way of life that, for all its hardships, had a rhythm and a meaning that is utterly absent here. Here, the only rhythm is the clatter of machinery and the frantic, desperate scramble for work. A sharp nudge from the woman next to you brings you back to the present. Daydreaming won't fill your basin, she mutters, not unkindly. She is right. You shake your head, trying to banish the ghost of the green orchard. The memory was a dangerous indulgence, a brief, sunlit holiday of the mind that only makes the return to the cellar's gloom more painful. You look at your hands, stained in salt. These are not the hands of a countrywoman anymore. These are the hands of a London piece worker. They are the only things that stand between you and the workhouse. You must not let them be idle. You grab another handful of pods and the pop-pop-popping sound begins again. The sad, monotonous rhythm that you hope will be loud enough to drown out the memory of the wind in the trees. The pea harvest, like all things, comes to an end. The green mountains in the cellar shrink day by day, until one morning you arrive to find the doors locked and the cellar silent. The season is over. Once again, with no warning, your meager income vanishes, the city goes, and the city takes away, with an indifferent, mechanical cruelty. For 2 days, you survive on the few pennies you had saved. You eat nothing but a small piece of stale bread each day. Then gnawing hunger returns, sharper and more demanding this time. It is a physical presence, a cold, cramping thing in your belly that makes it hard to think, hard to walk, hard to hoop. The fear of the workhouse becomes a constant, terrifying drumbeat in your mind. On the 3rd day, the hunger is too much to bear. At the water pump, you swallow your pride, the words feeling like ash in your mouth, and ask if there is anywhere to get a meal. A woman, seeing the desperation in your eyes, tells you about a soup kitchen run by a church mission a few streets away. They open at noon, she says, her voice low. You'll have to queue. The thought fills you with a deep, chilling shame. To take charity is to publicly declare your failure, to admit that you cannot provide for yourself. It feels like another step down the ladder, a step perilously close to the bottom. But the hunger is a more powerful force than your pride. You thank the woman and set out. You find it easily enough. A long, silent line of people, huddled against the damp brick wall of a church hall, is all the sign you need. You take your place at the end of the queue. The people in this line are the city's rock bottom. The old, the sick, the crippled, the mothers with starving children. Their faces are a gallery of quiet desperation. No one speaks. No one makes eye contact. There is a shared, unspoken understanding that you are all here because you have nowhere else to go. The air is cold and damp. A typical London drizzle beginning to fall, seeping into your thin shawl. You shiver, from the cold and from the humiliation. You see well-dressed people hurry past on the other side of the street, their gazes deliberately averted. To them, you are an unsightly spectacle, a problem to be ignored. Finally, the church doors open. The line shuffles forward, slowly, into a large, decorating hall. The room is spotlessly clean, but cold and institutional. Long wooden tables and benches are arranged in neat rows. At the far end, several middle-class women in starched aprons and fine bonnets stand behind a large copper vat, ladling soup into tin bowls. Their faces are set in expressions of serene, pious duty. Before you can eat, you must pay the price, not in coin, but in attention. A man in a dark suit, the minister, stands on a small platform and calls for silence. He leads you all in a prayer, his voice booming in the cavernous room. Then, he delivers a short sermon. He speaks of the evils of drink and idleness, of the importance of thrift and piety. He exhorts you to mend your ways, to put your faith in God, and to be grateful for the Christian charity being bestowed upon you. You barely hear the words. You are simply enduring it, your eyes fixed on the steam rising from the great copper vat. The meal, it is made clear, is not a rite. It is a reward for your patient piety. This was the very heart of the Victorian debate on charity. Was it a pure, compassionate act, or was it a tool for social engineering? Philanthropists of the era were deeply divided. Some, like the famous Baroness Burdick Coutts, funded massive projects with a genuine, if paternalistic, desire to help, but a more dominant philosophy was that of scientific charity, which argued that indiscriminate giving was harmful because it encouraged dependency. They believed charity should be a hand-up, not a handout, and it should only be given to the deserving poor, those who were sober, hard-working, and suitably grateful. This sermon, this moral instruction, is the tool they use to separate the deserving from the undeserving. The porridge comes with a side of moral judgment. After the sermon, you are finally allowed to file past the vat. A woman hands you a bowl of greyish, watery soup and a chunk of bread. You take it to a bench and sit down. This is the moment you have been waiting for. The reason you have endured the queue and the lecture. You lift the spoon to your lip. The soup is warm, and for that you are grateful, but it has almost no taste. It is thin and bland, with a few pieces of unidentifiable vegetable and grist-like meat floating in it. This is likely a version of model soup, a recipe famously developed by the scientist Count Rumford decades earlier. His goal was to create the most scientifically efficient and cheapest possible method of feeding the poor, a nutritional formula reduced to its barest components. It was designed not for pleasure or comfort, but for the sole purpose of preventing starvation at the lowest possible cost per head. The blandness is not an accident. It is part of the design. You eat quickly, mechanically, not tasting, just filling the void. The warmth spreads through your stomach, a small, temporary truce in your war with hunger. But the feeling of shame remains. You feel the eyes of the ladies in their fine bonnets on you. Their expressions a mixture of pity and scientific curiosity. You are not a guest. You are an exhibit. You are a soul to be saved, a problem to be managed. As soon as you are finished, you return your bowl and leave, eager to escape the clean, cold, judgmental atmosphere of the hall. You step back out into the rain, the sermon already forgotten, the taste of the soup already fading. The charity has kept you alive for one more day, but it has also stripped you of a piece of your dignity. The hunger in your belly is quieted, for now, but a new, colder hunger has taken its place. A desperate, aching hunger for a life where you will never, ever have to stand in a line like that again. After the humiliation of the soup kitchen, your search for work becomes frantic. You walk for miles, your worn-out shoes doing little to protect your feet from the cold. Where cobblestones, you ask at every warehouse, every workshop, every small, dirty storefront that looks like it might offer piecework. The answer is always the same, a shake of the head, a door closed in your face. The city, which once seemed to brim with frantic activity, now feels like a vast, knocked fortress. As you are making your way back to your tenement one afternoon, defeated and soaked through, the world begins to dissolve. The familiar shapes of the buildings across the street grow hazy, their edges blurring. The gaslights, lit early in the growing gloom, become fuzzy, indistinct halos. The air, always thick with smoke and mist, is becoming something else, something tangible. It grows heavier, denser, pressing in on you. A great London fog is descending. This is no ordinary fog. This is a pea souper, a notorious London phenomenon. It is a thick, choking blanket woven from the natural mist of the Thames Valley and the millions of tons of sulphur house coal smoke pouring from the city's chimneys. It is yellow-gray, sometimes almost black, and it has a foul, metallic taste. It stings your eyes and catches in the back of your throat, making you cough. Within minutes, visibility is reduced to just a few feet. The roar of the city is muffled, distorted. Sounds become strange and ghostly. A horse whinnying nearby, a shout that seems to come from nowhere. The familiar streets are transformed into a terrifying, bewildering maze. You can no longer see the landmarks that guide you. You are lost, just a few hundred yards from your own door. You creep along, one hand trading against the cold, damp brick of a wall, feeling your way like a blind person. The fog is disorienting, isolating. The bustling city has vanished, replaced by a silent, ghostly world. You are utterly alone, wrapped in a cold, wet shroud. It feels as though the city itself is trying to suffocate you, to erase you completely. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of shuffling and stumbling, you recognize the familiar iron railing of your own tenement building. You practically fall through the door, your heart pounding with relief and a strange, primal fear. You climb the stairs to your room. The sounds of your neighbors coughing and moving about a welcome, reassuring sign of life in the suffocating gloom. You enter your room and shut the door, but the fog comes with you. It seeps into the cracks in the window frame. Under the door, the air in your room becomes thick and cold, carrying the same acrid, sulfur house smell. You light your candle, but its flame is a small, weak thing, battling against the oppressive gloom. The fog presses against your window pane, turning the world outside into a formless, swirling abyss. Your room is no longer a part of a building, a part of a city. It is a tiny, isolated island, adrift in a silent, grey ocean. These fogs, or London particulars, were a defining feature of the city's life and a serious public health crisis. During a severe fog, death rates from respiratory illnesses would skyrocket. The elderly and those with weak lungs, like many of your neighbors, were particularly vulnerable. The thick, chemical-laden air was a poison, and for several days, the entire population of London would be forced to breathe it. There is a long-running academic debate about when, exactly, people made a definitive link between the fog and the coal smoke. For a long time, the fogs were treated as a natural, if unpleasant, feature of the London climate, a mysterious visitation, while many people anecdotally understood that the smoke made them worse. It took decades of scientific study and mounting death tolls for the government to take the problem of air pollution seriously. The Great Smog of 1952, which killed thousands, was the final, tragic catalyst for change. For you, in the 1880 seconds, there is no debate. You can taste the coal on your tongue. You can feel the grit in your lungs. You know exactly what you are breathing. The fog also created a strange and specific type of employment. During the densest P Super S, men and boys known as link boys would appear. They would carry burning torches, or links, and Dorothy would walk in front of wealthy people or their carriages, guiding them through the blinding gloom. It was a temporary, dangerous job, but for a few, the fog was a source of income. For you, trapped in your fourth-floor room, it is only a source of isolation and despair. The fog lasts for 3 days, 3 days of twilight, of silence, of being trapped in your cold, damp room with nothing but your own thoughts and the growing ache of hunger. You cannot go out to search for work. You can only wait. The world becomes your room. You lie on the floor, wrapped in your shawl, listening to the muffled sounds of the city, feeling the cold seep deeper into your bones. The great, roaring engine of London has ground to a halt, and you, one of its tiniest cogs, are trapped in the silent, waiting machine. The isolation is a physical weight, pressing down on you, and you begin to feel as if you might simply dissolve, becoming just another unseen particle in the endless, suffocating fog. The fog finally lifts on the 4th day. It doesn't vanish, but slowly thins, like a grey curtain being drawn back. revealing a city coated in a new layer of grime and filth. The familiar roar returns, sounding almost cheerful after the days of muffled silence. But the enforced idleness has left you in a desperate state. Your last few pennies are gone. Your hunger is no longer a dull ache. It's a sharp, dizzying pain. As you prepare to go out again, a frantic, almost hopeless search for any kind of work, a thought, born of pure desperation, flickers in your mind. Rights. Do you have any? Is there no one you can appeal to? No law that protects a person from starving in the street? You know, of course, that you have the right to go to the parish and declare yourself a pauper, to submit yourself to the shame of the workhouse, but that is the right to surrender, not the right to live. You are thinking of something else. The right to a fair wage, the right to safe working conditions, the right to not be cheated by a sweater who dismisses a week of your labor with a flick of his wrist. The thought is almost laughable, and a bitter, humorless smile touches your lips. You are a woman. You are poor. You are unmarried. In the great, complex legal structure of Victorian England, you are a ghost. You exist at the very bottom of a social and legal pyramid that is built to protect property, to protect men, and to protect the interests of the wealthy. Your interests are not even a footnote. You cannot vote, of course. The political world is a distant, noisy spectacle run by men in top hats who legislate on matters so far removed from your reality they might as well be on another planet. If you were married, your legal identity would be almost entirely subsumed by your husband's. Under a doctrine known as coverture, he would own your property, your earnings, and have immense power over your person. As a single woman, a famous soul, you technically have more legal autonomy. You can, in theory, own property and sign contracts. But this is a cruel joke. What property do you own? The clothes on your back, the dented bucket in the corner. What contract can you sign, other than the unspoken, brutal contract of piecework, where all the terms are dictated by the sweater? The history of women's rights in this era is a slow, grinding battle, fought by women far removed from your station in life. They are middle and upper-class women, campaigning for the right to attend university, to enter the professions, to control their own property after marriage. Their struggles are important, historic, but they are not your struggles. The gulf between their fight for legal recognition and your fight for a loaf of bread is immense. Historians still debate the relationship between these early feminist movements and the lives of working-class women. Did the legal gains made by women like the suffragists eventually trickle down to benefit all women, or did the movement, in its early stages, largely ignore the economic plight of their poorer sisters, focusing on rights that were only meaningful to those who already had a degree of economic security? As you sit in your room, hunger cramping your stomach, the idea of campaigning for the right to vote seems like an absurd luxury. You are campaigning for the right to survive until dinner. You do have one right that is grimly enforced, the right to be arrested. You know about the laws against vagrancy. If you were found sleeping in a park or begging on the street, you could be arrested and sent to prison. The law, in its majestic equality, forbids both the rich and the poor from sleeping under bridges. You know about the laws governing theft. To steal a loaf of bread, an act your body is screaming at you to consider, could land you in prison for weeks, sentenced to hard labor. The law provides a safety net, of a sort. It will catch you if you fall. But the net is made of iron bars. You've also heard whispers at the water pump about a strange and specific legal cruelty. If a woman like you, a spinster, were to die in her room, the landlord had the right to seize her meager possessions to cover any unpaid rent. The law protected his property, his income. Even after your death, your body could be sent for a pauper's burial, but your worn-out shawl and dented bucket belonged to him. It was the final, posthumous assertion of the law's priorities. Property first, people a distant second. The fleeting thought of rights evaporates, leaving only the cold, hard reality. There is no one to appeal to. There is no law to protect you. The intricate legal system of the British Empire, a marvel of complexity and tradition, is a machine that is not designed for you. In fact, it is designed to be invisible to you, and for you to be invisible to it, unless you commit a crime. You push yourself to your feet. Your legal standing, or lack thereof, does not change the fundamental equation of your life. You need to find work. You need to earn a penny. That is the only law that matters in your world. You open your door and step out into the hallway, leaving the abstract, useless concept of justice behind in your empty room. The only court that will hear your case is the court of the street, and the only verdict it offers is survival or defeat. You are now part of the city's legion of shadows, a ghost drifting through the streets with a single, all-consuming purpose. The hunger has become a strange, disorienting force. It makes the world seem slightly unreal. The sounds of the street distant and muffled, the faces of the passers-by like blurred watercolor paintings. Your search for work is no longer strategic. It is a primal instinct, a desperate scanning of every alleyway, every doorway, for a sign of hope. But as you wander, your focus shifts. You begin to notice other shadows, other ghosts who are moving with a different kind of purpose. They are not looking for a sweater or a foreman. Their eyes are cast downwards, scanning the ground, the gutters, the piles of refuse heaped in the corners of courtyards. They are the city's scavengers, the people who live on what everyone else throws away. They operate in a world below yours, an economy of the gutter. You see the mudlarks, mostly children and old women, waiting for the tide of the Thames to go out. Then they will descend onto the slick, stinking mud of the riverbank, wading deep into the foul-smelling silt to search for anything of value that might have been dropped from the ships or washed up from the city. Scraps of metal, bits of coal, and lost coin. They will spend hours in the cold, toxic mud, their clothes and skins soaked in the river's filth, for the chance of earning a few pennies. You see the bungee robbers, stooped figures with greasy sacks over their shoulders, picking through piles of household waste, searching for bones from last night's dinner. These bones will be sold to bone boilers, where they will be rendered down to make glue, or charcoal, or the base for cheap china. Nothing is wasted. Every part of the city's carcass is picked clean. This is the hidden recycling system of the Victorian metropolis, a topic that fascinates economic historians. They debate the true scale and function of this informal economy. Was it simply the last resort for a few thousand desperate souls, a footnote in the city's economic life, or was it a vast, unrecorded shadow industry, a critical part of the supply chain for manufacturing, processing the city's waste into raw materials in a way that never appeared on any official balance sheet? From where you stand, it looks less like an industry and more like a human food chain, with these people at the absolute bottom. And then you see her, an old woman, even more bent and dragged than the bungee robbers. She is walking slowly along the edge of the street, her eyes fixed on the ground. In one hand, she carries a small pail. In the other, a little wooden scoop. You watch, curious, as she stoops down and carefully, methodically, scoops up dog droppings from the cobblestones, placing them in her pail. You are so stunned you stop in your tracks. What could she possibly be doing? The man, noticing your bewildered stare, grunts and offers an unsolicited explanation. Pure find it, he says, with a mixture of pity and disgust in his voice, sells it to the tanneries. The word pure is a piece of industrial slang so grotesquely ironic it takes your breath away. You learn that this substance, the city's most reviled refuse, was a vital ingredient in the leather tanning process. It was used in a process called baiting to soften the animal hides and prepare them for tanning, making the leather supple and smooth. The tanneries in Bermondsey, across the river, would pay for it by the bucket. This was, perhaps, the most wretched and despised of all the street trades. It was a job undertaken only by the most destitute, the people for whom even rag sorting or bone grubbing was a step up. To be a pure finder was to be at the absolute nadir of human existence in London, to be a living symbol of utter desperation. You watched the old woman for a moment longer, Her movements are slow, weary, but practiced. She does not look up. Her world is the gutter. Her gaze is fixed upon her grim harvest. And in that moment, your own suffering is thrown into a shocking new perspective. Your life is a nightmare. You are hungry. You are cold. You are on the verge of destitution, but you are not hurt. The work you have done, sorting rags, making matchboxes, shelling peas, sewing shirts, was brutal, exploitative, and soul-crushing, but it had a thin, fragile veneer of being worked. You were given materials. You produced a thing. You were paid, however poorly, for your labor. It was a transaction, however unfair. This is something else. This is not production. This is pure, unadulterated scavenging of the lowest order. It is a level of existence you did not even know was possible. A profound, ice-cold terror washes over you, a fear that is deeper and more visceral than anything you have felt before. The workhouse was the ultimate failure, the formal, institutional end of the line. But this is the informal, anonymous end of the line. This is the fate of those who fall so far they don't even have the strength to get to the workhouse gate. This is what it looks like to truly, completely disappear. You turn and walk away, your own hunger momentarily forgotten, eclipsed by the horror of what you have just seen. The image of the old woman with her pail and scoop is burned into your mind. You thought you were at the bottom. You were wrong. There is a bottom below the bottom, and you will do anything at all, to avoid it. The image of the pure finder becomes a spur, a terrifying ghost that follows you through the streets, driving you forward. The memory of her stooped form banishes all pride, all hesitation. You will not become her. That single, powerful thought propels you through another day of desperate searching, and this time, you find something. It is not piecework handed out by a sweater. It is even more direct, more elemental. You see a woman on her hands and knees, scrubbing the front steps of a large, prosperous-looking house. You simply wait, standing a polite distance away, until she is finished. As she is gathering her bucket and brushes, you approach and ask if she knows of any other houses that need their steps cleaned. She looks you up and down, taking in your worn clothes and the desperate hope in your eyes. She sees not a competitor, but a fellow sufferer. She gives you a curt nod and jerks her head down the street. Try number 42, she says, cooks a terror. But she pays on the spot. And so you become a step scrubber. Your employer is not a factory or a sweater, but the formidable, red-faced cook of a middle-class household. Your job is to arrive every morning at dawn, with your own bucket and brush, and scrub the front steps until they are spotlessly clean. For this, you are paid a penny and given a chunk of leftover bread, often so hard you have to soak it in water from the pump to make it edible. The work is brutal. You are on your hands and knees on the cold, hard stone. In all weather, you use harsh dry soap that eats at the skin of your hands, leaving them perpetually red and raw. You scrub and scrub, your arms and shoulders screaming with the effort. But it is a penny, a reliable penny, and in your world, that is a kind of riches. But as the days and weeks of scrubbing pass, a new problem emerges. It starts as a small, dull ache in your lower back, a minor complaint you can ignore. Then, it grows. It becomes a constant, gnawing presence. It is there when you wake up, a stiff, grinding pain that makes getting to your feet a slow and careful process. It is a hot, burning line across your back as you kneel on the cold stone. It is a throbbing, weary ache as you try to find a comfortable position on the hard floor of your room at night. Your body, your only tool, your only asset, is beginning to betray you. The years of poor nutrition, of sleeping on hard surfaces, of relentless physical labor, are all adding up. The pain is no longer a temporary result of a hard day's work. It is becoming a permanent part of you. You learn to move in a certain way, to bend from the knees instead of the waist, to sleep curled in a tight ball to ease the pressure. You learn to live with it, as you have learned to live with the hunger and the cold. It is simply one more hardship to be endured. This chronic pain was an epidemic among the laboring poor of your time. Rheumatism, arthritis, repetitive strain injuries, spinal deformities. These were the invisible wounds of a life of physical toil. The medical establishment of the day was often unsympathetic. There is a persistent historical debate about the attitude of Victorian doctors towards their poorest patients. Did they see these ailments as the direct, unavoidable result of horrific working and living conditions, or did they, influenced by class prejudice, often attribute them to the supposed moral or constitutional weaknesses of the poor themselves, laziness, malingering, or a simple bad constitution? To be poor and in pain was often to be suspected of faking it to avoid work. In the absence of affordable medical care, you turn to the only option available, patent medicines. You see the advertisements for them plastered on every wall, in every cheap newspaper. Dr. Bartholomew's bitters for a weak constitution, Mother Bailey's soothing syrup for crying infants. They promise miraculous cures for every ailment known to man. You save your pennies for 2 days, going without bread, to afford a small bottle of Dr. Finch's miraculous ointment for aches and pains. The bottle is dark green glass, with a fancy label depicting a robust, smiling man. You take it back to your room as if it were a holy relic. That night, you uncork it. The smell is sharp and potent, a mixture of alcohol, camphor, and something peppery. You rub the oily liquid onto your lower back. It burns, a spreading, fiery heat that is almost as bad as the ache itself. But then, slowly, a strange, pleasant numbness begins to spread through the area. The sharp edges of the pain recede, softened into a dull, distant throb. For the first time in weeks, you feel a measure of relief. You don't know it, but your miraculous alignment is a simple and dangerous concoction. It is mostly cheap alcohol and turpentine, with a bit of chili pepper to create the burning sensation, and a healthy dose of laudanum, a tincture of opium. You are not curing the source of the pain, you are just numbing it with a narcotic. It's a short-term, addictive fix for a long-term, degenerative problem. But for you, it is a miracle. It allows you to keep working. It allows you to get through the day. The pain is still there, waiting beneath the surface. A monster held at bay by a few drops of oily liquid. You come to rely on the little green bottle, but the relief it offers is an eye. The damage to your body continues, silent and unseen. The constant, gnawing ache in your back and the burning numbness of the alignment have become the two poles of your physical existence. It is the slow, steady drumbeat of your body's long and quiet surrender. The alignment works its magic, for a time. It dulls the pain in your back enough for you to continue your daily scrubbing. You exist in a hazy, slightly numb world. Your focus narrowed to the stone steps, the bristly brush, and the next penny. But your body, under relentless assault, has found a new way to betray you. It's a betrayal that is quiet, subtle, and far more terrifying than the honest, shouting pain in your back. It starts with the needle, with the reliable penny from the step scrubbing. You can occasionally afford to buy a candle and supplement your income with a little sewing at night. It's a small comfort, a return to a skill you possess, a quiet activity after a day of brutal, physical work. But one evening, as you try to thread the needle, you find you cannot. The tiny eye of the needle seems to swim in and out of focus. You hold it further away. You bring it closer. You blink, rub your eyes, and try again. The thread simply will not go through. A cold dread, colder than any winter morning, begins to creep over you. You look around your small room. The edges of the furniture you scavenged, a small crate for a table, a bundle of rags for a cushion, seem fuzzy, their outlines indistinct. The flame of your candle, usually a sharp, bright teardrop of light, is a blurry halo. It's your eyesight, your most precious tool. The one thing your entire life as a peace worker has depended upon is failing. The cause is simple and brutal: a lifetime of malnutrition, combined with years of doing close, detailed work in poor, flickering light. It's not a sudden event, but a slow, creeping erosion. The world is gradually losing its sharpness, its clarity, its definition. It is dissolving into a soft, uncertain blur. You stop scrubbing the steps for a day and spend your penny on a visit to a six-penny doctor, a back-alley physician who treats the poor for a small fee. He works out of a cramped, dirty room that smells of stale herbs and carbolic acid. He is a tired, impatient man. He has you read a chart on the wall, and you cannot make out the letters. He peers into your eyes with a small magnifying glass for a few seconds. Then he gives you his verdict, his voice devoid of all sympathy. "Your eyes are worn out," he says. "It happens. Nothing to be done. That's it. No medicine, no advice, no hope. Just a blunt, final judgment. Nothing to be done." He takes your penny, and you are dismissed. The decline of eyesight was a common and catastrophic event for the aging poor in your time. It was the cliff edge at the end of a long, hard road for a seamstress, a watchmaker, a clerk, or anyone whose livelihood depended on precision. Failing eyesight was a death sentence for their career. It was the moment you went from being a skilled or semi-skilled worker to being completely unemployable, a burden on the parish. Historians often study the large-scale economic forces of the era, the booms and busts, the rise of new industries. But there is a quieter field of study that looks at the microeconomies of aging and disability. What happened to a worker when their body, their only capital, began to depreciate? There's an ongoing debate. Did the Victorian economy have any way of accommodating this natural decline? Or was the system so ruthless that it simply used people up and then discarded them when they were no longer fit for purpose? Your doctor's cold pronouncement, worn out, suggests a grim answer. You are a machine that has broken down, and there are no spare parts. The terror you feel is profound. The pure finder was the symbol of falling to the bottom. But her work, as wretched as it was, did not require sharp vision. Your failing eyesight threatens to take away even the lowest forms of labor. How can you sew threads if you can't tell cotton from wool by sight? How can you sew a straight seam if the needle is a blur? How can you scrub a step clean if you can't see the dirt? That night, you sit in your room, the candle unlit. There is no point in wasting it. Your sewing days are over. You stare into the darkness. But the darkness is no longer just outside you. It is inside you. A fog behind your eyes that is slowly thickening. You hold your hands up in front of your face, just a few inches away, in the faint grey light from the window. You can barely make out their shape. They are just blurry, indistinct shadows. These hands, these calloused, stained, overworked hands, they are still strong enough to work, but they are useless without your eyes to guide them. The connection between your mind, your eyes, and your hands, the delicate, essential trinity that has allowed you to survive, is breaking. The world is becoming a room you can no longer navigate, a book you can no longer read. The needle, your old, familiar to love survival, now lies on your shelf, a tiny, useless sliver of steel, a monument to a life that is slipping away from you. One blurry, heartbreaking inch at a time. The days that follow are filled with a new, quiet kind of terror. Each morning, you wake up and the first thing you do is a test. You hold a hand in front of your face. Is the blur worse today? You look at the crack in the ceiling. Is it sharper, fuzzier? The world is a shifting, unreliable landscape, and you are losing your map. You continue to scrub the steps at number 42. For now, it is a job you can do by feel as much as by sight. You can feel the grit under the brush, feel the smooth, clean stone when the work is done, but you know your time is short. The cook has already complained once that you missed a spot. Her shot. Accusatory voice was terrifying. Not because she was angry, but because she was right. You simply hadn't seen it. The blurriness forces you to live in a smaller, more cautious world. You walk more slowly, your feet shuffling, afraid of stumbling on an uneven paving stone. You no longer look at the faces of the people who pass you. They are just indistinct shapes. The city, once a source of overwhelming sensory input, is fading, its sharp edges and vibrant, chaotic details dissolving into a gentle, meaningless haze. You are becoming a ghost in a ghost city. Your isolation, which was once a product of your poverty, is now compounded by your failing senses. You feel a profound and terrible disconnect from the world around you. You are in it, but no longer truly part of it. The water compartment, once a source of vital information, is now just a confusing murmur of voices. You can't see the expressions on the other women's faces, can't participate in the subtle, non-verbal language of the group. You simply wait for your turn, fill your bucket, and retreat back into the solitary confinement of your room. One afternoon, as you are making your slow, careful way back from your work, your foot catches on a loose cobblestone you did not see. You stumble, lurching forward, and the bucket of water you just hauled up for flights of stairs flies from your hand, clattering down the steps and spilling its precious contents. The noise is shocking in the quiet of the stairwell. You stand there, trembling, unhurt but for the shock. And you want to weep, not for the fall, but for the wasted effort, for the water you will now have to haul all over again. And then, a door creaks open. It is the woman from the room next to yours, the one whose husband you sometimes hear shouting. You've never spoken to her, beyond a muttered greeting. She peeks out, her face a pale, blurry oval. She sees you, standing there, shaking. She sees the empty bucket. She says nothing. She simply disappears back into her room and emerges a moment later with her own bucket, which is half full. She walks over to you, pours her water into your bucket, and then turns and goes back into her room, the door closing with a soft click. The whole encounter lasts less than 10 seconds. No words are exchanged, but the simple, silent act of generosity is so unexpected, so profoundly kind, that it breaks through the grey fog of your despair. For a moment, you are not alone. Someone saw you. Someone understood your plight, the small, daily tragedy of the spilled water, and offered what little they had to help. This small, quiet moment is a perfect example of what historians of poverty call mutual aid networks. In the absence of any formal state support, the poorest communities often developed their own informal systems of reciprocity and support. It wasn't organized charity. It was a complex, unwritten social contract based on the understanding that everyone was living on the edge. You helped your neighbor when they were sick, because you knew that next week, you might be the one with the fever. You shared a crust of bread, because you knew what it was to have nothing. There is a long-standing historical debate about the pervasiveness of this mutual aid. Some Victorian commentators, particularly those from the middle class, painted the slums as brutal, dog-eat-dog places where everyone was out for themselves. They saw the poor as lacking in morals and community spirit, but many historical accounts, drawn from the diaries and letters of the poor themselves, tell a different story. They speak of incredible acts of kindness, of neighbors pooling their resources, of communities banding together to support a family in crisis. The truth is likely that both realities existed. The desperation of poverty could make people selfish and cruel, but it could also, sometimes, foster a powerful, unspoken solidarity. You've also just experienced a specific, though little known, form of slum currency, the sharing of water. In a place where clean water was a precious, heavy commodity that had to be physically hauled from a pump. To give someone your water was a significant act. It was a gift of time and labor, a donation of one's own physical strength. You stand in the dim hallway, looking at the water in your bucket, a small, Murky pool that is now filled with more than just water. It is filled with a moment of human connection, a flicker of light in the growing darkness. It does not solve your problems. Your eyes are still failing. Your future is still a terrifying blank. But the kindness of a cross, or in this case, a bucket, has given you something you didn't even realize you were starving for. A reminder that you are not entirely invisible. Someone, in this city of millions, saw you fall, and for a moment, they helped you up. You pick up the bucket and continue, very carefully, on your way. The kindness of your neighbor is a small, one stone in the cold river of your days, but it cannot stop the current. The inevitable happens a week later. The cook at number 42, her voice sharp with impatience, tells you not to come back. You leave more streaks than you scrub, she says, pressing a final penny into your hand. I need someone with good eyes. The words, though expected, are a hymn of blue. Your last, tenuous connection to the world of work, to a regular income, however small, is severed. You stand on the pavement, the penny in your palm, and for the first time, you have nowhere to go, no sweater to see, no cellar to find, no steps to scrub. There's only your room. You make your way back. Your steps are naturally slow. The world outside the tenement door has become a hostile, alien landscape, a place you can no longer navigate or find a purpose in. The door to your room, once a symbol of your small, private misery, now becomes a refuge, a sanctuary. You step inside and slide the bolt. Here, at least, the blurriness does not matter as much. You know the shape of this small space by heart. You know where the wall is. You know where your bundle of clothes lies. Here, you are safe from the stumbling blocks and the judging eyes of the outside world. And so, your world begins to shrink. It contracts, day by day, until its boundaries are the four damp, padding walls of your room. Your days become a slow, quiet ritual of waiting. You lie on your pallet of rags, listening. The sounds of the tenement, once a background noise, are now your only connection to the world, your only entertainment, your only clock. You know it is morning by the clatter of the buckets for the water run. You know it is midday by the faint cries of the vendors in the street below. You know it is evening by the sound of work-weary footsteps on the stairs and the low murmur of conversations through the walls. The life of the building becomes your life. You no longer go to the water pump yourself. The journey up and down the 4 flights of stairs is too treacherous for your blurry vision. Instead, you rely on the same neighbor who gave you her water. You offer her your last few possessions in exchange for her fetching you a small pail of water each day, a tin cup, a worn-out coat. She accepts them without a word. A silent, grim transaction. It is not charity. It is a barter of the last resort. Food becomes a memory. The gnawing hunger that drove you for so long begins to change. It softens, transforming into a profound, bone-deep weariness, a hollow lightness in your head. Your desire for food is replaced by a more powerful desire for rest, for stillness. This physical decline, this slow retreat from the world, is a process that has been studied by social historians, often through the sparse, impersonal records of the parish poor relief system. They debate the final stages of a life like yours. Was this retreat a conscious choice? A decision to withdraw and await the end with a kind of stoic dignity? Or was it an involuntary process? The simple, biological result of starvation and untreated illness. A body shutting down system by system. From where you lie, it feels like both. Your body is failing, but your spirit is also tired. The will to fight, which burned so fiercely for so long, has cooled to a dull ember. You spend hours looking out the window, but you no longer see the details of the rooftops or the laundry lines. You see only shapes and light. You watch the grey square of the window brighten in the morning and darken into blackness at night. The window is your calendar, your clock, your television. It is your final, fading connection to the world of the living. You've heard of a peculiar condition known among the city's poorest as giving up it is. It was a formal medical diagnosis, of course, but it was a recognized phenomenon. It described a state where a person, overwhelmed by sickness, poverty, and despair, would simply turn their face to the wall, refuse food, then quietly fade away. It was a surrender of the will to live. A death brought on not by a specific disease, but by the sheer, crushing weight of a hopeless existence. You are not there yet. You still drink the water your neighbor brings. But you can feel the pull of that surrender. It is a gentle, seductive current, promising an end to the pain, the hunger, the fear. It promises a final, absolute rest. Your universe, which was once the vast, glowing, terrifying city of London, has now shrunk to the size of this room, and even the room itself is beginning to fade, its corners dissolving into soft shadows, its details blurring into a single, monotonous grey. Your world has become a bed, a window, and the quiet, rhythmic sound of your own shallow breathing. The hunger is no longer a sharp pain. It has become a strange, hollow peace, a floating sensation that detaches you from the cold floor and the damp walls. Your body, having consumed all its reserves, is now consuming itself. The relentless drive to find work, to earn the next penny, has been completely extinguished, replaced by a profound and overwhelming weariness. It is not sleepiness. It is something deeper, a weariness of the soul. The sounds from the tenement, your last connection to the world, begin to change in character. They are no longer sharp and distinct, but soft, muffled, as if coming from a great distance. The baby's cry, the man's cough, the arguments, they all blend into a single, gentle, meaningless whole. It is the sound of a world that is receding, like a ship sailing away from the shore. You no longer try to get up. The effort is too great. You lie on your pallet of rags. Your breathing is shallow, rhythmic whisper in the quiet room. Time has lost all meaning. There is no morning, no night. There is only a slow, gentle oscillation between the pale grey light from the window and the deep, soft darkness. Your mind begins to play tricks on you. You drift in and out of a state that is neither sleeping nor waking. Memories surface, not as sharp, painful visions of the past, but as soft, comforting dreams. You are a child again, lying in a field of tall grass, the sun warm on your face. You can feel the tickle of the grass on your arms, smell the sweet scent of wildflowers. The vision is so real, so peaceful. You smile. You are no longer in a cold, dark room in London. You are home. Then, the vision fades, and you are back in the grey stillness, but the feeling of peace remains. The struggle is over. The long, desperate fight for survival, the daily battle against a city that never wanted you, has ended. You have not won. You have not lost. You have simply stopped fighting. This process, this quiet fading, is the part of your story that is most invisible to history. There are no records of these final days. The social reformers, the journalists, the statisticians, they documented the brutal conditions of your life, the sweated labor, the squalid housing, but they were not here for this. This final, solitary journey is yours alone. Historians who study mortality rates in Victorian London can see the grim results. They can point to the charts showing the shockingly high death rates from malnutrition, from diseases exacerbated by hunger, from what was often simply recorded as debility or exhaustion. But the numbers on the page cannot capture the lived experience. There is a debate, quiet and philosophical, among some historians. Can we ever truly understand the inner world of the past, especially the inner world of the inarticulate and the unrecorded? Or are we always just looking at shadows on the wall, interpreting data without ever grasping the human reality behind it? Lying here, in this peaceful, floating state, you are the human reality that no chart can ever represent. You think of the other woman, the woman with the fur side jaw, The old woman taken to the workhouse. The pure finder in the gutter. You are all part of the same silent, invisible army. The casualties of a war that was never declared. You were the fuel for the city's great engine. And now you are spent, consumed, reduced to this final, quiet stillness. You've heard a strange term, whispered in the streets, for this kind of death. Dying of what? It was a common, unofficial verdict among the poor. It wasn't a medical term. But it was more accurate than any doctor's diagnosis. It encompassed everything. The lack of food, the lack of shelter, the lack of warmth, the lack of hope. It was a death caused by an absence of everything a human being needs to live. A sound brings you back from your reverie. It is the soft click of your door opening. It is your neighbor, the one who brings you water. You cannot see her clearly, of course. She is just a tall, blurry shape, a gentle shadow against the grey light of the hallway. She comes in and places a small pail of water on the floor beside you. She stands there for a moment, looking down at you. You can feel her presence. A warmth in the cold room. Perhaps she says something. Your name, maybe. But her voice is a soft murmur, like the wind. You try to thank her, but no sound comes out. She waits another moment. Then she turns and quietly leaves, closing the door behind her. It is the last act of human kindness you will know, and it is enough. You are not entirely alone at the end. Someone has borne witness. The room grows darker. The grey light in the window fades to a deep, velvety black. The gentle hum of the tenement, the last sound of the world, fades with it. You are floating now, in a quiet, peaceful, empty space. The field of grass returns. The sun is on your face. There is no more pain. There is no more hunger. There is no more fear. There is only the long, slow, gentle release, a final, quiet surrender. There is no ceremony. There is no moment of dramatic discovery. Your absence is noted in the same way your presence was, as a quiet, gradual thing. Your neighbor, the one who brought you water, knocks on your door one morning and receives no answer. She tries again in the evening, still silence. On the second day, she tells the landlord. He is not a cruel man, but a practical one. He has seen this happen before. He uses his own key to open the door. The room is cold and still. He sings you, a small, still from under a thin shawl and a pallet of rags. He stands there for a moment, his face impassive. Then he closes the door, goes downstairs, and sends a boy to fetch the parish beadle. Your private, solitary end has now become a piece of public, administrative business. The beadle arrives, a man in a slightly too small uniform, full of a weary, bureaucratic importance. He is followed by a parish-appointed doctor, the same kind of tired, overworked man you saw once before. They enter your room. The doctor performs a cursory examination. A matter of a few minutes. He confirms what is obvious. He fills out a certificate for the cause of death. He does not write starvation. That word is too stark, too accusatory. It suggests a failure of the system. Instead, he uses the common, vague euphemisms of the time. Syncope due to asthenia, perhaps. Heart failure due to weakness, or simply natural causes. It is a medical fiction, a final layer of grime to obscure the truth. Your story now becomes a series of entries in dusty, leather-bound ledgers. The first is in the parish death register, a single line. Your name, if the landlord knew it, and if he spelled it correctly. Your approximate age, your address, and the doctor's official cause of death. Your entire, long, low, hard life. Your struggles, your fears, your brief moments of kindness, all reduced to a few words of spittery, bureaucratic script. Because you have no family to claim you and no money for a funeral, your body is taken by the parish for a pauper's burial. This is the final, dreaded indignity. You are placed in a simple, cheap pine box, along with several other unclaimed bodies. There is no service, no mourners, no headstone. You are taken to a public cemetery and buried in a common, unmarked grave. Your final resting place is as anonymous as your life. This was the fate of tens of thousands of London's poor. The city's cemeteries were overwhelmed, and the problem of how to dispose of the indigent dead was a major public health concern. The solution was often these vast, communal graves, pits where dozens of coffins were stacked, one on top of the other, before being covered over with a layer of earth. Historians and archaeologists who have studied these pauper grave sites speak of a profound, sobering reality. The sheer density of the burials is staggering. It is a silent, subterranean testament to the scale of the poverty that plagued the city. The debate continues about the social meaning of these burials. Were they simply a practical, cost-effective solution to a logistical problem, or were they a final, powerful statement about the social worth of the people buried there, nameless in life, unmarked in death? Their very bones mingled together in an anonymous, undifferentiated mass. Back in your room, the landlord performs the last rites of your existence. He gathers your few possessions: the tin cup, the worn comb, the dented bucket, the single, precious needle that now lies on the floor. He will keep them, as is his right, against the rent you owed. He will sweep the floor. He will air the room out. And by the next day, he will have a new tenant, another desperate soul looking for a cheap room, another person starting their own story in the same small, square box where yours came to an end. And so, you disappear, completely. You leave no letters, no photographs, no heirlooms. You leave no mark on the world, save for a faint depression on a pallet of rags and a single, unreadable line in a Paris letter. You are one of the truly street spinsters, a name that would be used by later social investigators to describe the thousands of women like you, whose lives of quiet, desperate toil ended in a quiet, unrecorded death. You have become a statistic, a ghost, an invisible woman whose story was written in water. And for over a century, that is where your story ends. You are forgotten, buried in a nameless grave and lost in the archives. You are just one of the countless, silent majority whose lives were consumed by the great, hungry city. You are invisible. Until, one day, a historian, digging through the dusty ledgers for a different reason altogether, stumbles upon your name. They see the cause of death, the address, the occupation listed as seamstress or charwoman, and they pause. They see another name like yours, and another, and they begin to see a pattern. They begin to see not just a series of isolated tragedies, but a vast, hidden social catastrophe. And slowly, painstakingly, they begin the work of making the invisible visible. They find your line in the ledger, and they begin to ask the question that is the start of all history. The question that has allowed us to find you here, tonight, in this quiet place. The question is, who were you? And so, our story, which was born from a single line in a forgotten book, now returns to the quiet from which it came. The journey through the damp, gas-lit streets of that other London is complete. The sounds of the city, the clatter of the carts, the cries of the vendors, the soft pop of the peapods, they all begin to fade now, becoming distant and soft, like sounds heard in a dream. You can feel the weight of that life begin to lift, a life of struggle, of cold, of hunger, but also a life of incredible endurance, of quiet resilience. And as that world dissolves, you can allow your own awareness to soften, to blur at the edges, just like her vision did. But for you, this blurring leads not to fear, but to a deep and welcoming peace. Let the details go. Let the story become a gentle, formless feeling of rest. There is nothing more to understand, nothing more to see. The only thing left to do is to drift, to float on the quiet, peaceful current that is now carrying you, effortlessly, toward a deep and restorative sleep. The curtain falls on this peaceful scene, for those still in the audience. The next play is ready to begin whenever you are. Good night.